I fell in love with this idea of building a receipt printer that prints a morning brief every single morning. I saw this on Twitter and I was super inspired by it. So today I'll be teaching you how to build one of those yourself with zero skills. And we'll go through the project step by step. So let's dive right into it. So step one with any hardware project, in my opinion, is always to start planning. So let's grab my laptop and go and load up Schematik. So often in this first step, I don't even have the part. So I just want to ask Schematik, is this possible? How would this be possible? I'm just going to ask, is it possible to make a receipt printer that prints a morning brief every single day? And I'm going to switch it to ask mode because I'm not ready to build yet. I just want to ask some questions. So Schematik will now think about this and it will even search the web for this. It told me that yes, this is possible. And it told me a little bit about the parts that I would need here. So let's have a look at what we need to build this project and see if I actually already have this at home. So we're gonna need an ESP32, that's a microcontroller, and I do have an ESP32 at home, but if not, they're very cheap. But one thing that I don't have at home is a thermal printer. That's like a receipt printer. So we need to buy that. And we also need a power supply. So let's order one of those two. And then we need some thermal paper. I'm pretty sure that will come with the receipt printer. So let's figure that out. It explains how this could potentially work. And it talks a little bit about the technical details, like how to wire it up and stuff like that. That's not super interesting to me right now because I don't even have the parts yet. But what is interesting is that it actually shows me the approximate cost. This project will be between $25 and $40. And if I look at it, the biggest cost factor here is the thermal printer. Now, I would love to own this thing. I think paying $10, $20 for that is actually totally fine. So I'll go ahead and order some stuff online. I'll be back with you tomorrow or whenever those parts arrive. So it's the next day. I'm wearing the same t-shirt for continuity purposes, but here I have our receipt printer. It's called a CSN A2 receipt printer. It just looks like any other receipt printer would look. So that's really cool. I also got a few other parts. So this is the receipt printer, but I also got, obviously I brought my ESP32. This ESP32 I really like to use in projects like this because it has a massive breadboard. It just makes it really easy to prototype and do easy stuff. For now, with this project, we're not really worried about the form factor yet, so we can kind of build it out in the space instead of, you know, having to do soldering and doing hard things. This is the most noob-friendly board because it just has a massive breadboard with an ESP32 on top, so highly recommend this one. And then the third thing I needed for this project was a power supply. A friend of me recommended me this power supply. What is really cool with this power supply is that you can actually change the voltage yourself. So it's a really nice power supply to buy if you are doing a lot of projects that might run under different voltages. It comes with a lot of little adapters, so you can really connect it to every single thing. But for this project, I'm actually going to use this adapter, which allows you to connect it to jumper wires. So now that we have our parts, I think it's time to do step 2, which is assembly. So for the assembly, I'm actually gonna ask Schematik to build the project that we were asking it questions about yesterday. And what it will do is it will create a diagram on how to wire things up for me. All right, so Schematik is done with loading and it has given me a diagram of how to connect this. What is interesting here is that it shows 4 connections on the diagram, but actually our printer has 6 connections, as you can see here. And that is because it has ground twice in the thing. That's something that hardware manufacturers do sometimes, but you can just both bring those to ground, and I'll show you later how to do that. And then it has this really funny one. Number 2 here is called NC, which means no connection. And this is so weird with hardware, and this is one of the reasons why hardware is hard. Sometimes they add these really random things. NC means no connection, so it actually means you do not need to connect that piece. So I think we're ready to wire things up. So let's go. And one really cool thing is that we now have a better setup for this because we now have an overhead shot in the studio. So the first thing I'm gonna do is the thermal printer came with these wires. So red and black is always for power, so I'm gonna put that in the power port here. And then it had this other cable. This one is for data, so let's just put that in as well. Next thing we need to do is we need to connect the power cable to our power supply. And one thing that's very important is that whenever you're dealing with a power supply, just make sure it's unplugged and check it 10 times. This power supply comes with this connector, and this is a really great connector because this connector allows us to actually put some wires in it and then connect it to this connector. So how do we do this? We basically screw open this thing like so, and then we put two cables in. So there's a plus sign on this connector. I'm just going to put a red cable in because, you know, plus is always red. The black cable goes in the ground one. Now we're going to connect this to the thermal printer. Very, very simple. We're going to put red in red and black in black. So that's connected. And now this connector, there's a lot of connections here. That's what hardware is all about. This connector we can now connect to our power source, so that is connected to power. So if we were to actually put some power on this, I think it will turn on. I don't think it will do much. Maybe it will move the paper, but you know, let's check to make sure that our power system is working. So I'll set our power source to around 5 volt because that's the minimum that Schematik told me to use, and I'd rather use less than more. So I now plug this in, and I'm very, very curious whether this is gonna work. Now the light is flashing, so that means we have some power. Let's press the button. Oh my God, that's already really cool. So we can print empty receipt paper, super cool. So that's great, we have a power system working. Now let's make sure that we connect it to the ESP32. The ESP32, what it will do is will actually bring the data in onto the printer. So the printer now only knows how to, you know, move paper, but it doesn't have any data. And let's just follow what Schematik says. So the black one is always ground, so I'm just going to connect that to the ground of the board here. And then we have a green and a yellow cable. What I like to do is I like to match the colors of the cables. It just makes your life a lot easier. So I'm going to connect the green one to the green one here and the yellow one to the yellow one here. And now all I need to do is connect those to the right ports. Okay. We are connected. Now, I don't know if this is going to work, but that brings us to step number 3. We need to actually load the code that Schematik has written for us onto this thing to see if it can actually print something. One thing I'm seeing in the code here is that it actually needs to load in quite some things, like we need to set our Wi-Fi password and name, and we need to give it some news data API key because it wants to actually fetch the news and the weather and stuff like that. But I don't think that we should do all of this just to test whether the data thing is working. So what I suggest we do here, change it to just print good morning so that we can kind of test that first before we go and do more complicated stuff. So I'm just going to ask it, can you just make the printer say good morning and not connect to anything for now? Keep it simple. So this updated the code now. Now all that I need to do is actually connect the ESP32 to my laptop. So let's do that. And now we're going to connect to the board in Schematik and hit deploy. This is called flashing the board. Here we actually load the code from Schematik onto the board. So interestingly enough, the logs here say that it has printed, but it hasn't printed the project. So that's a shame, but that's actually really good because this is how we debug projects. We try something, we see it doesn't work, and we try again. So I'm gonna tell Schematik, it doesn't seem to have worked. It hasn't printed anything either. What could this be? And I'm gonna switch to ask mode because ask mode will help us debug before we start writing any new code. All right, so it says a few things. It says it's probably the BAUD rate and it needs to be a different BAUD rate. And it says it could be the wiring being wrong, that we kind of put the wires in the wrong place. So let's have a look here. I'm looking at it and I'm instantly noticing that I did something wrong because it should be port 16 and 17. So maybe if I just reset, that will be it. Oh my God, it's working. It says good morning. Great. We have the thing. So it's printing the thing. Now we can actually make the code a little bit smarter and make it do some magical things. This is so cool. Like there's something so magical about having something print good morning. I can't believe it. It's so fun. Now I'm gonna ask Schematik to go a step further and actually pull in the weather data, pull in my calendar and add a little to do. So let's just ask it to do so. can you show my Google Calendar appointments of the day on the print, and then maybe a to-do I can fill in myself. Alright, so while that's loading, you've made it pretty far into this video. So if you like what you see and you want to support the channel, please like, subscribe, comment on the video, share with a friend. All of these things really help us. We just crossed 1,000 subscribers, but obviously my dreams are way bigger. I want 100,000. I'd love some support. It's super appreciated. So it's done with the code. Now I need to put in my Wi-Fi name, my Wi-Fi password, and my Google Calendar API key and Google Calendar ID. Wi-Fi name and password are super easy, but let me just show you how you can add your Google Calendar ID, because that's actually a little bit harder. So you first need to go to console.developers.google.com. I know it's a mouthful. And then you need to create a new project. There's tons of tutorials about this online, but I just thought I'd show you in this video. So you're gonna click new project, give it some kind of random name, and click create. Now the next thing you need to do is you need to click here on enable APIs and services. And there you need to find the calendar API. You're just gonna click that and then you're gonna click enable. After you've done that, you get to this page with a lot of text and stuff, but all you need to do is go here to credentials and you need to add a API key. So you're gonna click create credentials and then you're gonna click API key. And you can just give that any random name. So you can give it like a schematic receipt printer. And then you're going to select here, and then here you need to type in calendar and you click OK. And after you click create, you'll get your key. Never share your key with an LLM or with anyone else. So what I'm doing here is really a bit bad, but I'm just going to do this for demonstration purposes. And then all you need to do is you add that key in the code. And then the last thing you need to do is add your calendar ID, and that's just your email. So you'll just type that in. And then here our Wi-Fi name and password, which I'm not going to do on camera. And then we just hit deploy again and see what happens. All right, so the moment of truth. What will it print here? Will it print our beautiful morning briefing? Oh my God. And there we go. We have a super cool receipt printer. It prints the weather, it prints my schedule, and it prints a little to-do list. Honestly, this is so exciting. I can't believe it. It's just so cool. Yeah, we did this and it was not that hard, right? Like, I think there were a few issues, a few bugs, but that's very often with hardware projects. You need to resolve a few issues, but when you do and when it works, you can see it in my face right now. It's just so exciting. This was super cool. All the links, everything you need is in the description. There's one downside to this project, which is that this looks a little bit bulky. We have a receipt printer, we have this board, we have all these cables laying around, we have the power, and it just doesn't look pretty. And I think for next week, what I want to show you is a tutorial in which we go from this ugly device to something that's a bit more pretty. We're going to 3D print a casing around it. We're going to make sure that the cables are wired up well. We're going to make it a lot smaller. So if you're excited about that, I'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.